Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for coming. I know it's right after lunch. We got a lot to cover here, so I'm going to start. My name is Juan Cicada. I am the principal scientist and the head of the AI lab at data.world. And I'm here to talk about what do enterprises lose by not investing in semantics and in knowledge. So, if you're wondering what the answer to that question is, my answer to this question is the following. We lose reusing data. And what happens about reusing data is that without or limited reuse is the reason why we are wasting so much time and money and we're missing out on strategic opportunities. So that's the answer to the question. That's the takeaway. If you need to leave because there are more talks, that's it. You can all leave, but hopefully you want to stick around. We can go dive into this more detail. But let's talk first about the problem here. Let's take a look at this little description here. You can see that the Van Buren Bank has felt the effects of deregulation. It's super competitive. They need to make more decisions differently and need more kinds of information. There's all these threats to their customers now. Unfortunately, the bank has different customer identifiers. There's no standards. There's no way to identify things, right? There's so much data integration that is required. Does this sound familiar? Yes, people nodding their heads. Well, I just took this out from a document from 1992. The problems that we have today are the same problems people have been bitching about for the last 30 years. So what the heck have we been doing over the last 30 years? We should ask ourselves this really existential question. And I argue, look, our objective here is to really develop the infrastructure for the effective use of data by users. Now, what I mean by I think is everybody in this room. We're part of this community, right? And then there's been so many areas in engineering and technology and sciences working toward this. And what is effective use? I mean, that effective is actually an ambiguous term on purpose here because it really depends on users. Now, if this is what we've been trying to, this is the goal we've been trying to accomplish, we have been investing a lot in the last plus 30 years, right? This is just a quick laundry list of things that we've been investing around, right? And there's many more things here. But we can actually take a rocket to space, we can bring it back to Earth, it can land on a platform in the middle of the ocean, but we still can't say if these two spreadsheets match. It's kind of ridiculous, but what we could argue here is that the work that we do here is freaking harder than rocket science. And I want to make the case that it is. Because you know what? Rocket science, it's just physics, it's natural sciences, it's stuff that we can actually create experiments and test and reevaluate and do experiments and all that stuff. And in our world, in the data world that we all live in, we have to deal with more complexity, which is human, people. So you know what? We should pat ourselves on the back, give ourselves grace, because I'd argue that our work is even harder sometimes than rocket science. Now, we should ask ourselves, like, what if that objective we're trying to accomplish, to what extent have we actually accomplishing it, right? Do we just need to continue doing what we're doing? Just give me more time, give me more money, we'll get there? Is there something new that we need to start that we're not doing yet? Is there something that we probably have been doing too much and we're like, that's enough, we're just making the 92%, making 93%, 94% better, like, whatever. Or do we revisit how we've been doing problems before? So I'd argue that in a way, we're actually going in circles, right? We're reinventing the wheels and stuff like that. And what I like about this image is that if you really focus on your local optima, you think you're going straight. But we zoom out, we realize that there's a lot more out there. We're going in circles. So Einstein's definition of insanity, you keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, right? The problem that we are trying to tackle today is the same problem people were tackling 30 years ago. Something is wrong, something is missing. We are literally driving ourselves insane. So I guess we've been hearing this a lot over and over again, but I think what I want you all to take away is that this problem of data management is not just a technical problem, and we've been focusing on this as a technical phenomena for the last 30 plus years. And because it's harder than rocket science, what makes it harder is that it's a social technical phenomena. We have to deal with humans, and humans are complicated. And that's what makes life so hard. So I think we just need to acknowledge that that if we come from this technical space, we need to get out of our bubble to make this work. Otherwise, we're going to drive ourselves insane. which means that if you're not ready to cross and realize it's a social, you have the head in the sand. And guess what? You are part of the problem. So I think it's really important right now for us to realize that we need to treat this as a social technical phenomena and get our heads out of the sand and start working towards this. So let's revisit this problem, right? We talk about data management around this. So let's talk about what I call the data, the data world that we've lived in, the data first world. So if I give you this piece of data, what does this mean? I'm hoping people will say, right, the meaning of life, everything, right? Okay, so if I give you then something else here, right? All right, you're giving me a list of things, a null. Okay, you give me some context around this. You're probably measuring something, okay? There's a unit. Okay, so it's a measurement of something, right? So if I just get this piece of data by itself, it's a number, it's a natural number, right? There's something that's missing. And just to kind of, for sake of simplicity, if we look at a relational database as a table, everything that's inside the table, I'm going to call data. And everything outside of that, I'm going to call it knowledge. A schema by itself is knowledge, but what we want to go make, the point I want to make is that I can enrich that more. So if I tell you, look, this actually is a measurement for a warehouse, and this is an example of one of our customers, a company called Prologis. Prologis is like the world's largest real estate and logistics company. If you buy anything on Amazon, 80% chance it goes through a Prologis warehouse around the world. So they sell space. So this is a measurement for the warehouse, okay? So it's not just I'm measuring something, it's a length of something. I know it's for a warehouse. So it's a height of a warehouse, but what do I know about a height of a warehouse? The height can only be between 15 and 50 feet, for example, right? That's semantics right there. Those are rules around here. I can take it to the next level, and I know that the heights of warehouses before 95 in the United States was between 15 and 25 because there's a regulation that changed around that stuff. This is more knowledge. What can I use? I know that warehouses obviously have a height. Therefore, if I have a null value in there, it's a known missing value. So what can I use this knowledge for? Like, obviously, data quality is the first thing you would go do around these things. But let's actually tie this, what would I do with this knowledge? What does it tie to the business? What happens if I have the incorrect height? If I'm selling space, and I say we only have 42 feet, but we actually have 50 feet, I'm leaving money on the table. I could have sold more space. If I said it was 42 feet, but it's actually 30 feet, I sold all that space, I'm in trouble. And then there's a storm coming in. I got a bunch of stuff that can't fit in, right? This is how we start. This is how knowledge helps us to connect to really strategic endeavors in the business. Now, why this is hard, and what I didn't introduce also, my T-shirt, Honest No BS. So for those who have heard about me, I host a podcast, Cataloging Cocktails, the Honest No BS data podcast. We've been doing it for now, I think we're on our 5th year. So a podcast we did a couple weeks ago with the CTO of Databricks of EMEA, the field CTO. We had this discussion. It was a couple weeks ago. You should really listen to this. It's like we were talking about interoperability, but why is it hard to do standards interoperability? We think about this as a stack, where the lower part of the stack, right, is kind of the very technical things. We see this across in data, right, and in kind of the internet standards, right, the network standard stuff, like, and then you go very low on the stack, and higher the stack kind of gets higher, more closer to users, right? So at the bottom of the stack, we have data and technology, which actually this is kind of where we come from, and this is where we have an engineering mindset. This is where we're hyper-focused on solving very technical problems, which are measurable, right, which are objective. And I can create experiments. I can say that this is better than this because I've measured it. We can actually come up with standards. That's why we have standards. DBT itself is becoming a kind of industry standard, right? We have SQL, right? We have all these standards, iceberg tables and all that stuff. But the moment we kind of go up that stack, things get fuzzier. And it gets fuzzier because we start figuring out, what does this mean? I have to go talk to people around these things. So, and then you go up the stack, you have to deal with people, you have to deal with the politics, you have to deal with the power on this stuff. And what happens in our industry ourselves is like, that gets too complicated, I keep going back and go down the stack. And I think this is something that we need to acknowledge, this fuzziness that's happening going up the stack, but something needs to change over there. So we need to go up that stack. And what makes it even harder around this is that that stack is for one silo of the world, and then you have another silo of the world, and then you keep having different people thinking about things and calling things differently. Folks, this is why this work that we do is really hard. And again, I argue that this is sometimes, I would argue this is harder than rocket science. So when we talk about semantics, I think kind of the easiest, a simple way to think about it is it's a function. Like the work that we do here, all this data work that we do is really that you take as input that data. Remember that table that said 42 in feet and null? That's the data that I get. And I want to inject semantics to that, and that's that function that after the output of that, the f of x equals y in this case, right? F of x is going to be that data with more knowledge. And that semantics that we're putting in there is what I'm calling not just the data work, but I'm actually want to push this more, call it the data and knowledge work. And the point is that the more of this that we put in there, the more investment we go do, the output becomes more understandable, therefore more reusable. So what is data and knowledge work? From a technical perspective, I mean, just it's a quick laundry list of things. I'm not going to go through this. Raise your hand if you do any type of this work. I'm hoping everybody's raised their hand, right? Here's a list of social tasks that we do that consists part of data and knowledge work. Raise your hand if you also do this work, right? I think almost the same. All right, so eventually we are doing this, and I think what happens is that this type of data and knowledge work is not being treated fully as a first-class citizen, and we need to treat this more as a first-class citizen. So why do we want to invest in knowledge? So why all this? So we want to do for reuse of knowledge, but let's deeper why. Number one, of course, it's AI right now. So all of these generative AI and these LLMs, they really need to reuse the knowledge of our enterprise, of our business. So our lab at data.world, actually, so a year and a half ago, so let's think about it. So GPT, OpenAI, GPT comes out, and then, of course, everybody starts saying, look, we want to go chat with our data and start chatting with our structured data. And oh, I can use ChatGPT to go generate SQL, right? So people are starting to go do this like in January 2023, coming up with all this stuff, very quick examples. And by the way, just a reminder, text to SQL is a problem that we have been working on from a computer science perspective for 30 years. So this is not a new thing. LLMs come in and like people think, oh, this is now easy and solved. And I'm like, and then you start seeing everybody doing all these demos and stuff, and it's cute. Cute little tables and columns and cute little questions and oh, why? But like this is far away from the enterprise. So I think that was so summer of 2023. We were at Snowflake Summit, and of course everybody started to talk, kind of announce some of these LLM stuff, and we're telling Snowflake, hey, look, semantics, knowledge graphs, this is where it needs to come in, and they're like, yeah, we get it, but we don't know really how much and so forth. So they actually challenged us. They said, well, show us, give us numbers, give a benchmark. So that's actually what we did. So with my colleagues at our lab, what we did was kind of organize a whole benchmark and stuff, and this was something that we did in November, and we followed up the work in May. And basically, the point here is that we've provided the evidence that by investing in semantics, investing in knowledge, and the work that we did here through knowledge graphs specifically, if you take a question, pass it to the LLM, and you only give it the context of that SQL database, and you take that same question and you pass it, and you give it the knowledge graph version of that database. So you've invested in knowledge to make that understandable. The accuracy over that knowledge semantic representation was 3 times more than if you didn't have it. And that's just like with simple prompt engineering, like zero sophistication around this, 0-shot prompts. And then we did further research on this about how to go increase even more by leveraging semantics and ontologies. And what was really cool, I mean, I'm a scientist, right? I lead a lab, I have PhD students and stuff, and I always tell my PhD students is, science is a social process, right? I want to go do something, I want to take an unknown and turn it into known, but the way we turn unknowns into knowns is that I want to share it with the world, and I want people to go to challenge it, and people to reproduce it and stuff like that. So we did all these experiments, and you can now see how things were increasing. That the first bar that you're seeing is the one just with only SQL without any knowledge, and then how we're increasing. The green is actually our system at data.world to go do this. So this is our results. But what I found really fascinating is that things started. So Jason, he's not here yet, but Jason here, DVT, like he took the whole work completely independently and replicated it, validated it. And then suddenly after that, it's got this huge boom, and that's why then we start seeing all the GraphRag manifestos, all the semantic layer companies are now using these results, these benchmark results, saying, look, we have the evidence that semantics actually increases the accuracy. That's why we're now hearing about semantic layers here, and go to Snowflake and Databricks, we'll talk about semantic layers. So this is one of my quick, easy answer is like, why want to invest in knowledge and semantics? Because of AI and LLM, period. If you do not invest in this stuff, your AI, your LLM stuff over your structured data is just going to go fail. Don't be a failure. Don't fail, please. So invest in this. So that's one reason. But let's go to the next one. I call this finding the balance between efficiency and resilience. So this is the Suez Canal. The Suez Canal is very, very efficient, right? It moves goods across the world very, very efficiently, very quickly. However, if we have one little ship goes like this, the economy of the world can go kaput. So it's not resilient around this. Now, what happens is that if we translate this to kind of in our data world, we live in an efficient world. Urgent. I need to answer this question. Give me something. I do a unit of work and I get that answer back. We're happy. Perfect. Then tomorrow comes out, here's another piece of work, another question we need to go answer, and I'm like, let's go do this quickly. Can I reuse something? I don't know, but I know how to go do this, and you do it again. And you keep doing this again, right? So we're being very efficient around this stuff. We're answering our questions around these things, right? But then, like, what happens if the work that I did in one could have been reused, because it replicated, I updated one thing goes forth, the pipeline one goes down, and so forth. Like, this is the stuff that we live in. So a lot of the pains that we go through, a lot of the reasons why we get called at 2 o'clock in the morning and why the numbers don't match is because in that moment, we were being very efficient, but we were not thinking about how this is going to impact things down the line. But this is not y'all's fault. Right? Because you are incentivized to be efficient. Because you need this now, you needed this yesterday. Now, from a resilient perspective, if we think about the investment is I should be able to go invest in a unit of work, which arguably this second unit of work may be more than that first one over here. But I want to be able to go invest such that when I do that, I'm not doing that unit of work for one question, I'm doing it for many more questions, for questions that I may know today, and hopefully for questions that I don't even know that are going to show up. And that's the balance that we should go to. And my argument is that knowledge, invested in knowledge and semantics, help us find this balance between efficiency and resilience. So being efficient, we get short-term gains, we get quick wins, but we take shortcuts, which takes us to technical debt. We know that we have to do something with the debt, but then we are just deferring that decision. So we're kicking the can down. So, I mean, these are just quotes. I've been talking to people right, through the podcast and meeting with so many customers and prospects and stuff. Like, these are things that I hear over and over again, right? Do you want to do it right, or do you just want to do it twice? Right? Urgent trumps important. This is one of those issues all the time, right? We're always so focused on the urgent. There's never enough time to do this properly, but there's always time to do this again. And perfect is the enemy of good, but holy, shitty and fast is also the enemy of good. Now, with the resilient mindset, is that we can spend time to optimize in the short term to have more medium and long-term sustainable wins. But the balance here is that if you're optimizing, right, then you're not actually producing those wins. So this is the balance that we need to go find. And I think the mindset of I want to be able to go deal with the known use cases of today and the unknown use cases of tomorrow. So by investing in knowledge, investing in semantics, we're able to find a balance with this. If we're not, we're just keep focusing on the efficiency. So this is the second reason why you want to go, if you want to break out of this cycle. And by the way, not everybody needs to break out of this cycle. Right? If you are in a hyper startup mode and stuff, like, you probably don't need to do resilience. You probably just need to make sure that I'm alive tomorrow. I need to get stuff right. So you have to understand what situation you are. So this is why I would argue this is not for everybody. The third one is that we need to make economical arguments around this. So I think investing in semantics and knowledge is really about achieving economies of scale. So I want to be able to make sure that whatever I do, 1 + 1 is always greater than 2. So remember that if I take back here, this is 1, right? And I answered 3 things or so forth, right? That's what I want. That's what we should be able to always be thinking about, right? And what this really prepares us for is that gets us fit for growth, gets us fit to be able to go deal with our competition, to be innovative around these things. Second, go down. The cost of debt, the knowledge debt. I put 20 to 40% of IT budget is spent on code maintenance. I don't have any citations around this because you can just Google this right now and you'll find reports all over the place around this stuff. Basically, there is a lot of money being spent to maintain code, the debt that we have here. That's money. If we can reduce that, that is not just savings over there. We can then use that for that other piece over here, which is we can start focusing on higher order strategies. I mean, we should not, it's so freaking annoying that we have to go wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning because something we're having on call, that stuff. Like, what we really need to be focusing on celebrating is that we've had, when you come into the room or construction, there has been how many days without an accident? Like, that's what we should be celebrating. We've had 63 days without any on-calls, right? Any pages. Like, that's what we should be celebrating. And I think we should just change that mindset that way. And because if we're not focusing on those issues, it means that we're focusing now on higher order strategies. And a fourth one here on the top one is, look, we're not really thinking and quantifying how much of this knowledge gets lost with people. People leave an organization, right? They retire, they jump from job to job. How much knowledge is in their head? And we have to train people every time we join. People goes in, how much time do you have to go in to figure out what code does this stuff look like? Yes, you have tools like catalogs that can help us, but still, like, what does that actually mean? Like, this is something that costs a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of effort. And by investing in knowledge, we're making all this stuff explicit, and we're going to be reducing all these costs and be able to increase the opportunities. Okay, so how do we start? So I want you all here kind of hopefully made the case that, like, the problem is still the same, harder and harder. Y'all's life is even harder than you think, right? I want to give you kind of arguments of why you should go invest in this stuff. But how do we actually do this? So number one, we need to talk to people. This is kind of an obvious statement, but I really want to go and kind of bring on some of the mindsets we need to have. So I know people always say, well, there's so many definitions for customer. There's so many definitions for revenue. I agree, there are. How many are there? It's finite. And it's probably not 1 million, probably not 100. Could be 50, I don't know, probably. It's a finite number. Can you go off and figure them out? I honestly believe there's no reason why you could not do that. And probably you'll not say, here's the final number, but you'll be able to get enough momentum to realize, oh, here are these different versions that we have. Like, we should start doing this. And this is really having a communication mindset. And you can do this formally, you can also do this informally, keep talking to people, because that, as a communicator, right, that helps us we're building those connections, we're talking to people, realizing, hey, you two are kind of talking the same thing, but have you guys ever met or something? Like, that's the type of stuff we need to have. So number one. Number two, we need to have a sales mindset. In sales, we have win-loss analysis, right? We landed a new customer. Fantastic. Let's understand why we won. What were the reasons why that customer selected us? We lost a deal. Fuck, let's go understand what we lost, who we lost against, okay? So we're having success with a particular data. Let's go figure out why that's being successful, right? What are they using? Who's using it for? Are they happy? What are use cases? Let's understand that, because I want to be able to go replicate that. Something is going bad, that pipeline broke, you fixed it. Okay, let's understand why that is happening, right? And continue diving into those details. So let's not just fix it and band-aid and keep going. We really need to have that retrospective analysis for the good things and for the bad things. I don't think we're doing this. Third, understand behaviors. We need to put our psychologist and therapist hat on. And a lot of the times we go to ask is people ask for data. It happens, how many people do this? People say, I need data for this. And sometimes we just give them the data, but but why? Why do you need that data? Ask why. Keep going why until you realize, oh, you're trying to solve this problem. Oh, so actually, have you talked to Alice over here? They're kind of doing something similar. There's data there you can reuse. Or what are you? What are your behaviors? What are your incentives? What's motivating you? What's your personal motivation around things? Right? Why do you want to go do something in Excel and not talk to us? Like we need to understand people's motivations and incentives around this. And this, by talking to them, we get to learn so much around what they're trying to go do. And fourth, we need to put an accountant mindset. Like I heard this once talking to customers. Like, we're actually going to put an accountant on the team to keep us honest with the numbers that we're reporting of the ROIs. Like, let's go do a retrospective of why something failed. Like, so let's go figure out how much actually time and waste that we wasted, and let's put that into dollars, right? Let's go figure out how that work that we invested in helped do something positive. What was the actual win that we can actually, how much money can we tie to this? Like, this is something that we can go do. Like, we talk about like employee churn, leaving. Like, let's go figure out what is the cost of that employee leaving and how much we're losing right there. These are different mindsets that we can put in. Again, you just realize that your job got 4 times more complicated. I'm telling you to become a salesperson, a psychologist, an accountant, and communicator, right? So, again, our job is hard. To talk to people. Here's an example when you're talking to people. This is on a technical side. So, in our lab a couple of years ago, almost 4 years ago, we had a PhD student saying, hey, we want to understand really what do nulls mean. So these are kind of like 5 different kind of standard kind of definitions of what a null could be. Oh, the value doesn't exist. It exists but could be anything and so forth. So we started talking. We did a survey with a bunch of like practitioners. So what does a null mean? Guess what? There are over 20 different distinct semantics of what nulls mean that we found by talking to people. If you're doing an analysis and you actually have different people, different teams, and you're telling them, hey, do this analysis, and there's nulls in the data, we don't even know if they're interpreting the nulls the same way. You're doing aggregations around stuff, right? And this whole paper that we have, you want to go find it, you can go see like the entire survey. Actually, one of the things I ask, like the whole survey itself is on GitHub. Like, it would be fascinating if you run the survey internally to go see how people, like, here's 20 different semantics. Like, what do you have in your organization? Interesting, if like you ask people questions that have negation, does this not have this or something, and there's nulls in it, like the answers are half the people said the answer would be A, and the other half people would say B. It's like, it's completely different, right? You get to learn this stuff by talking to people. Okay, let's talk about cultures. We need a cultures drive incentives. Remember that example of the warehouse that I gave for Prologis. So here's the crazy thing that they did. They said they identified several kind of business units that they had data quality issues where they tied it to revenue. And they said, okay, we're going to put quality metrics on these things. We're going to go track them. And we need to improve the quality. But how do we incentivize people to actually improve the quality, right, at the beginning of the source? Well, they said, we're going to take 20% of everybody's bonus, yearly bonus, and tie it to the quality metrics. You're an executive, you're boots on the ground with the clipboard at the warehouse. 20% of the bonus, the money you put in your pocket, is going to be tied to these quality metrics. And yeah, guess what? Quality improved. And their goal wasn't to really improve the quality, the data quality for those businesses. That happened, but they created a culture of people to care about the data, to care about the knowledge around what they're putting in there. This is really executive-led. We need to have a culture of avoid reinventing the wheel. Reuse. Who's here heard about FAIR? Findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. Okay. Look it up. FAIR. It comes from the pharma space. Data should be findable, should be accessible, interoperable, and reusable. That's their mindset. Just look it up. FAIR. Like, this is the type of stuff we should think about within organizations. We should think about sharing knowledge should always be part of our culture. So a lot of knowledge gets stuck in code. So who knows what this stuff means? The people who wrote the code. Okay, now we're getting better. We're turning this into some structured formats in YAML files or whatever. We're taking out that knowledge and put it into some structured format. Perfect, that's one step. But who has access to that? Only the people who have access to GitHub. we want to be able to put that out to places where people can go more accessible. So this is actually with one of our customers, S&P Global. That's their mindset, saying all our knowledge gets we put it into the catalog, and then the configuration files get generated automatically from the catalog. And everybody's now incentivized to go collaborate around that. And then finally, this is one that I've been kind of tinkering around with folks, saying, look, this balance of efficiency and resilience, like, yes, we need to deal with the urgent things, but we also need to deal with the foundational things. So actually split up your teams and have teams that work on urgent stuff. Let them do the shortcuts. Have teams that actually work on the foundations and keep an eye on the shortcuts that are being made and say, hey, okay, I see what you're doing here. We should kind of keep this up. And you actually have a connector team who says, this foundation stuff that we're doing, we know we're talking to these people, and we know that those folks over there are going to use it down the line. So 1 plus this 1 is going to help all these other people too. This whole data and knowledge work that I said, like, here's just a bunch of like culture kind of aspects that I see. Your team should think about the context, right? Be collaborative communication, conflict resolution, right? We don't agree on these things. This is the psychology. Let's get in the room and figure these things out. We need to have methodologies. You can argue that software has methodologies, and why? Because software code changes all the time. We're adding things. And historically, data hasn't changed that much. Historically, now things have changed. So we've gotten to the world where we now really need to go focus on getting better at dealing with kind of changes. This is the methodology that I came up with. This was a couple years ago. This is in my book, How to Design and Build Enterprise Knowledge Graphs, where you have 3 phases. You start really small. You start by understanding what are the set of business questions. You understand they would do a knowledge capture. You implement it. You build your knowledge graph, your data products and stuff, and then you generate the data that answers just those questions. And then you keep going, little by little, start increasing. Then you know that every single time you're doing things, things are actually, success means that I'm answering these business questions. I'm keeping track of it. This is actually, I've been working on this stuff, like, this was like 10 years ago. I was working with a customer kind of building out their semantic layers 10 years ago. These are their ontologies. What I want to show you is the blue line is basically the number of concepts, the number of things in their semantic, like customers and orders and so forth. And the yellow line is the number of attributes that are associated to each customer. The customer started off, they said, hey, what we need to go do is integrate all these 5 different databases and stuff. I'm like, nah, what you really need to go do is answer questions. And to do that, you need to get data from these 5 different databases. So what we focused on this whole methodology, every time we added a new attribute kind of to the data and everything, is because we knew that that attribute needed to exist for a particular reason. There were questions and tied to who were the people who needed it. So every time you see an increase in that yellow, it was like there were more attributes that were being added to the entire semantic layer, to the ontology, to the graph. And you can see there's a couple inflection points. Those inflection points are when we added a new database. So we didn't add the 4th database till like month 30 or 2021. After almost 2 years is when we added that 4th database. Little by little, we started showing the value in that stuff. And then they also get to realize, oh, this other backlog of questions that I had, I can start answering those now. Then, from a technology perspective, we need to get better at having technology that can connect data and knowledge together. Again, this is not a sponsored talk. I'm not a sponsor here. But this is my only slide where I'll say, like, what we do at data.world is that we're an enterprise data catalog, and we're powered by a knowledge graph because for us, we believe that all resources that you have need to be connected. So your traditional data catalogs, you think about it as like, oh, here's a table, and this table was derived from this other table, and you have this columns, and here are these dashboards. This dashboard relates to this, but I want to be able to connect that to anything else, to people, to processes, right, to how I model my business, right, and who's creating and so forth. Like, this effectively is starting to create the brain of your organization. Now, I want to close with one kind of like really future kind of, it's actually not future, it's actually what happens, but today on the web, about how semantics are so powerful in a distributed manner. So, have you ever heard about schema.org? So schema.org is a schema, an ontology, the semantic layer that Google, Yahoo, Bing, and so forth started to build together little by little over a decade ago. And they basically said, here is the schema that we want every web page to go use. They gave them an incentive. They said, if you use this schema, we will be able to understand your data better. We will be able to integrate your data better. So, for example, if you go to Austin, this is my favorite restaurant called Foreign and Domestic. I live 2 blocks away, so if you come to Austin, let me know. I'd love to go to have dinner with you, my treat. If you go search Foreign and Domestic, you get these nice knowledge panels on the side, right? So think about Foreign Domestic, this is my restaurant, but this could be your data product, your table, your dashboard, whatever it is. I want to go search for it. I want to know everything about that stuff. Oh, this is very nice, clear metadata. So what did Google, the whole Schemaorg? Actually, just go to Schemaorg right now. You can check it out. They have an entire schemas, ontologies, semantic layers, whatever you want to call, about all the things that they care about. And they obviously didn't start with everything at the beginning. They started very small, started increasing little by little. Here is part of the schema for what a local business is. A local business is an organization, right? They have all these different properties around that stuff. So now the system to go create these web pages, they embed all of that semantics inside of it. So actually, this is kind of from the validator of the web page. And you can see that if I index that page, I can automatically get this structured metadata from it. Now, the owners of this web page, whatever, they were incentivized to go do it because they're going to get better results on Google and get that stuff. This is how we should be. So this is how the web works today. So don't tell me that semantics won't scale. It freaking scales for the entire web for Google and everybody else. It does scale. And for those folks who've heard all this technology stack I talk about underneath the hood, these are knowledge graphs, this is RDF and stuff. This comes from the whole semantic web. This is the semantic web live right there, what I'm showing you. Every time you use Google and search, you're using the semantics part on the web. So just think about, this is possible. We've done it at a gigantic web universe scale. There's no reason why we cannot do this within the organization. We just need to align, talk to people, get the cultures, right? Get the incentives. Think about Wikipedia. Wikipedia is a way of sharing knowledge. There's incentives for people to go do this. Who's heard about Wikidata? Check out Wikidata. It's the structured version of Wikipedia where you can go query it. There are incentives for people to do it. People are sharing this. So, if you like what you heard, listen to our podcast, catalog. We do it live every Wednesday, most every Wednesday. I'm flying tomorrow, so just listen to our podcast. So to wrap up, the takeaway I want you to have: knowledge enables data reuse. Data reuse saves us time and money. We focus on strategic opportunities. Congratulations to you all. The work that you do is extremely hard. And I would argue that hopefully you realize it's even harder than what you thought. But this is a great opportunity. Knowledge drives the context for AI, enables us to have this balance between efficiency and resilience, economies of scale. Let's go reduce our tech stack, reduce employee churn, focus on higher order strategies. How do we get started? Communication, have this communication, sales, psychology, accountant mindset. For the leaders in the room, this is your opportunity to incentivize, to figure out those incentives and try it. And for everybody else, go share this with your leaders and saying, we need to have better ways, incentivize us better. What is your methodology to do data and knowledge work? Think about this. What are the processes that are going to work for you? There's no one size fits all. There's no silver bullet around that stuff. And we do need tools to make things better, to inject and manage that semantics. And with that, thank you very much.